Buongiorno e benvenuti al
Good
nostro
morning,
panel
ladies and
G20
gentlemen,
Italia
and welcome
2021,
to
giorno
our
donne e
panel
business
G20
all'inizio del
Italy
digitale.
2021,
Ne
Young
parleremo
People
con
and
Martina
Women
Vicenzione,
Vision for the
Silvia
Digital.
Viceconte,
We
Special
have a
Advisor
number of
G20
panelists,
Italy,
Silvia
quindi
Viceconte,
l'ufficio
Special
proprio Sherpa
Advisor
del G20,
G20 Italy,
Alberta
so this is the
Pellino,
Sherpa
Chair
office
del
of G20,
Y20 Youth
Alberta
Engagement Group,
Pellino,
Martina Trovato, Sherpa
Chairman
del
of the Worldwide
W20,
Engagement Group, and
del
Martina
Media
Trovato,
Engagement
Sherpa
Group
of
e Marco
W20,
Felisati, Sherpa del
and Marco
B20 e Business
Felisati,
Engagement Group.
Sherpa
Grazie per essere
G20.
qui con noi oggi.
Well, thank you for being
La
here with us.
trasformazione digitale è uno dei temi
Digital
portanti del
transformation is one
G20
of
a
the
presidenza
leading
italiana.
themes
La
of
pandemia ha
G20 with
accelerato
the
il
Italian
processo di
presidency. The
digitalizzazione,
pandemic has
mettendo in nero
accelerated the
rilievo sia le
digitalization
sfide
process
sia le
and has
opportunità.
highlighted both
Poiché la
challenges and
trasformazione
opportunities
digitale avanza a un ritmo
because
molto rapido,
digital
è essenziale
transformation
che i
is actually
responsabili delle
making
decisioni
strides ahead.
globali e
But for this to
nazionali
happen,
esplorino
it
e
is essential
affrontino il
for
suo impatto e i
national and
vastissima
international
portata
representatives
sull'economia e
to
sulla
explore its
società.
impact
Vediamo
on
quindi con
economics
i
and
nostri
society.
relatori qual è
Therefore,
il
with
ruolo
our
del
speakers,
G20 in
we're
tal
going to
senso e come
investigate
questo
on the role
tema
of the
viene affrontato a livello
G20
dei diversi
and
engagement group.
how this theme is
Come viene
addressed
definito
by
nel
the
Digital
different
Compass
engagement
appena
groups
pubblicato dalla
as
Commissione europea, i punti
defined
cardinali
by
di
the
questa
Digital Compass published
trasformazione sono
by the
senza dubbio le
EU.
skills,
All the pills are
l'infrastrutture, le pubbliche
skills,
amministrazioni, quindi la parte di
infrastructures,
government e
public
il business.
administrations,
Quando
therefore
parliamo di sfide
governance
del
and
digitale
business.
parliamo però
And
anche di
then we talk
tecnologie, proprio
about
tecnologie
the challenges,
abilitanti che
but we
stanno
talk about
rivoluzionando
technologies,
diversi
enabling
settori
technologies in
e
particular,
tecnologie che
which are
sollevano queste
revolutionizing
tematiche
mm,
di
many
equità, di
sectors,
inclusione
raising
e di
ethical
diversità.
issues,
Parliamo quando anche
inclusion
di
and
opportunità,
diversity as
però
well.
è
And we
importante
also
ricordare
talk
come
about
queste
opportunities
tecnologie,
because it's
machine
important to
learning, intelligenza
pinpoint how
artificiale di cui parliamo
these
molto oggi
technologies,
qui
machine
al
learning,
Cortina Digital
artificial
Forum, la
intelligence,
robotica,
etc.,
IoT e
which we have
5G,
mentioned here at the
possono
Cortina
giocare, anzi
Digital
già
Forum,
giocano un
robotics
ruolo
and 5G,
fondamentale
may
nell'aumentare la
play a
competitività e
fundamental
resilienza delle
role in
industrie,
terms
ma
of
possono essere anche a
increasing
servizio
productivity
poi
and
di politiche di
resilience,
sostenibilità
but
e
they
di
can also serve
circolarità. E
sustainability and
questo sono
circularity
tematiche che sono
policies.
anche al
And
centro
these are all
proprio dei
themes
temi
that are
chiave
really
del
central
G20 di
uh,
questo
to
anno.
the
Quindi per
key
capire
pillars of
meglio come
G20
funziona il
this year.
G20 e come
To
al suo
better
interno viene
understand the way
affrontata la questione del
G20 works
digitale,
and
darei la
how we
parola a
actually
Silvia
discuss
Viceconte,
the issue
Special
of
Advisor
digital, I
G20
would
per
give the floor
l'Italia.
to Silvia Viceconte, Special Advisor for G20
Grazie
Italy.
Martina
Silvia, to you the
e
floor. Thank you,
buongiorno a
Martina, and
tutti,
good
buongiorno
morning,
ai colleghi
everyone.
relatori.
Good morning to our
Io inizierò con un brevissimo
speaker
cenno storico
colleagues.
su quello che è
I
il
shall begin
G20.
with a
Il G20
historical
nasce come un
mention
gruppo
on
informale di
G20.
19
G20
paesi
was
e
first
dell'Unione Europea
originated
e
as an
nasce
informal group
come
by 19
risposta alla crisi
member
dei mercati
states
finanziari
of the European
asiatici
Union
nel
and
periodo
as an answer to the
97-99.
crisis of Asian
In questo
financial
periodo
market from
vediamo
97
chiaramente
to
come
99.
una crisi
In this
in un
time
mercato
span, we
molto
see clearly
lontano
how a
dal
crisis in a
nostro
very far
può
market from
creare una
ours
grave
may
instabilità
indeed
finanziaria
create a
non
severe
bienevole. Allora
financial
cosa succede?
instability
Che
worldwide.
i paesi
So,
del
what
G7
happens is that
a quel
the
punto
G7
decidono di
countries at that point
unificare una
decide
risposta
to
congiunta a questa
um,
crisi
have a
su
joint
un mercato che
answer to
possa
this crisis
aggredire i paesi
and set
emergenti.
up a
Poi dal
bigger group,
2008
including emerging
questo
countries
gruppo che
as
alla
well.
base
Since
si incontrava a livello di ministri
2008,
delle
this
finanze e
group
governatori delle banche
which used
centrali
to meet
viene
through
affiancato da
ministers
un
and
vertice, un
governors of
vertice di capi
central
di
banks,
Stato
is
che è
being
quello
coupled with
che
a
vediamo
summit
tutti nella
meeting
stampa
by head
regolarmente. Quindi dal
of state,
2008
which is what
abbiamo un
we
vertice di capi
currently
di
read
Stato
on the
con la
press. So
partecipazione dei
the
capi di
summit
Stato e
was
del governo.
organized in 2008
Oltre
and with the
al
participation
vertice,
of the heads
durante
of
l'anno di
states.
presidenza si
Besides the
svolgono dei
summit,
svariati
during
ministeriali,
the year of
dal
presidency, you have a
2017
number of
una
events. And so
ministeriale
since
sull'economia digitale, di cui
2017, we
parleremo a
have a
breve.
summit on digital
Ci sono
economy
dei
by
gruppi di
ministers,
Sherpa che
and
sono
we have
moltiplicati di
the
supporto
so-called
negoziati per
Sherpa
stimolare consenso dei
meetings
leader, quindi
to
sono delle
carry out
persone che
negotiations and
preparano il
facilitate
vertice in
leaders'
linee,
consensus. These are
e poi
people
delle speciali
preparing
riunioni di
the
gruppi
summit
di
meeting
lavoro
for
e
the
eventi
leaders, and then
speciali.
special
Il
meetings
G20
for
in sé
special
non è una
working groups
struttura
and special
permanente,
events.
dispone
G20,
di
it's
un
not a
segretariato
permanent
permanente del
structure.
paese
We have a permanent secretariat in the country where the presidency is held. In this particular case, Italy, and it is an institution that more than once has proven its own relevance. And last but not least, this was proven also last year with the presidency of Saudi Arabia, where heads of state were able to agree upon a commitment to finance international programs to fight against COVID. Now, let's talk about the Italian presidency. As we know, this pandemic has caused very profound damages and played a role both on health systems and on global economy as well. Once more, we have seen in terms of local problems and issues cropping up in areas of the world which are very far, may turn very quickly into a challenge for us as well. In a world which is increasingly interconnected, we think that multilateralism accounts for far more than an abstract idea. This is the key to fight against those challenges. And that's why G20, grouping most of the world population and the planet economy, must live up to the stake. I believe that this is so, and I believe that this has proven last year. And this year, even more so under the Italian presidency, focusing on three interconnected action pillars: people, planet, and prosperity. We know that we have to give a quick answer to solve this pandemic, but also we have to guarantee an equal, fair, universal access to treatments and vaccines. We need a quick recovery. We had huge economic damages, but this recovery must be focused on people's needs. We also need a restart, ambitious and sustainable. And I believe that the Italian presidency has two big priorities, and this speaks for itself. Besides actually solving the vaccine problem is sustainability and also an important digital pillar. Now, we need all these prerequisites so that prosperity may be long-lasting and requires a strategic use of the major growth and innovation engines. G20 is working in order to fill up the digital gap and make digitization an opportunity for everyone and increase productivity. In summary, not leaving anybody behind. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much. That was crystal clear, both in terms of the structure and priorities, but it's also important to understand how engagement groups work. And also, I would like to ask other panelists the way the various engagement groups are organized. Alberta Pellino, to you the floor.
Grazie al Cortina Digital Forum per l'invito per questo importante evento.
Thank you, and thanks for the Cortina Digital Forum. Well, this represents a unique historical moment where we're all called upon to contribute to the development so that nobody gets left behind. In this respect, young can and should provide an important contribution because they are the protagonists of the future we're building today. The engagement group, in fact, talks to people and develops with the target of allowing young people to express their own ideas and visions for the future to heads of states and of the G20. The process was promoted and coordinated by the Younger Society, the association that cooperates with International Cooperation Foreign Affairs and with the Sherpa office of Palazzo Chigi here in Italy, for the engagement of young people for G7 and G20 meetings. More specifically, this year we will tackle 3 topics, and the themes under discussion are in fact in line with the priorities dictated by the G20 presidency, Italian presidency, with special focus towards those themes where young can provide an important contribution and that concern young people in particular. The 3 macro areas we tackle are innovation, digitalization, and future of labor. Second one, sustainability, climate and energy. And third, inclusion and equal opportunities. The process will officially launch next week on the 29th of April at 12:30, and you'll be able to participate remotely through the social pages of the ambassadors of society, and from there on we'll start all the different processes that will take place in May, June, beginning of July online, and a series of workshops we organized in cooperation with international organizations and our partners, and then the process will converge into the July summit from the 19th to the 23rd of July that will be hosted in Milan and Bergamo. During which we hope it'll be possible to have delegates coming from the G20 countries, be them in person or online, to discuss the final proposals that will then be presented to the Italian G20 presidency. Thank you very much, Alberta. Now I'd like to leave the floor to Martina Rogato. Thank you, Martina. Good morning, everybody, and thanks to the Cortina Digital Forum. I today represent Women 20 W20, which is one of the 8 official G20 engagement groups focusing on women empowerment and gender equality. We are 98 activists in the G20 countries, which since 2015 started sharing policy recommendations to the G20 summit. Italy has the G20 presidency, so also Women 20 has taken the bat from Saudi Arabia last December. We have about 10 Italian delegates with activists, university professors and presidents of NGOs. And we represent, if you want, Italian civil society in various sectors that are obviously important for Women 20. So we talk about digital, entrepreneurship, sustainable, environmental as well as social responsibility and sustainability. Women 20 had its kick-off meeting last February, and at that time we presented to the international delegation all our 7 priorities for the 2021 Italian presidency, and now we are going through the negotiation phase to discuss the main inputs we will share with the G20 meeting summit in the next few months. We have a permanent delegation, and on a yearly basis they discuss yearly priorities, and the next 13th, 14th and 15th of July instead we'll have the Women 20 summit in Rome, hopefully in presence or in a hybrid version, during which we will finalize our recommendation document and we will give it to President Mr. Draghi. Our priorities for 2021 obviously are connected to the historical topics for Women 20. Those we worked on ever since 2015. So digital transformation, women and work, and women when it comes to entrepreneurship and access to finance. With the Women 20 Italian presidency, we then decided to also add 2 other pillars to these 3 themes, inspired by the people, planet, prosperity of the Italian G20, the 3 Ps, but also to the international context. And those civil societies has identified as priorities connected to gender equality. Apart from the 3 historical topics I mentioned before, we also have the topic of environmental sustainability, and also the one about the fight against violence against women and children. The 5 macro pillars plus 2 cross-boundary themes connected to gender, health and medicine, and fight to stereotypes and the importance of a cultural change. So 5 macro areas, 2 cross-boundary themes, which have been identified, taking into account the specific context of the pandemic we're going through, the Italian presidency, but they're also the result of a stakeholder engagement, because for months civil society has been engaged. In Italy, we had more than 200 organizations active on different aspects that have to do with gender equality, and we asked them which were the priorities we'd have to take for the 2021 G20 summit. Thank you. Thank you very much, Martina. What you said at the end is very important, because multilateralism, also at the European level, can also be discussed with citizens, with final users, with stakeholders, because this is of fundamental importance to guarantee that themes dealt with at high level are in fact in line with the society needs. And to conclude, one of the most important groups now during this period of economic transition, I'll now leave the floor to Marco Felizati, who's going to talk about the G20.
Thank you, Martina. And I really would like to say hello to everyone. Thank you for the invitation. And G20, as you have seen, is an engagement group, a veteran. B20 has been originated at the same time of G20. In Italy, we have more than 1,200 official delegates representing all the major world multinationals, and we have more than 2,000 participants representing more than 7 million companies. And this is a peculiarity because this is a group made by national associations, and I have the honor and the privilege of being the only owner and organizer of the B20. A couple of words on governance to tell you more about the leadership group. Mrs. Hema Marcegaglia is the chair and our working groups, and then I shall tell you something more about that later on, are presided by an Italian CEO in cooperation with 4 to 8 co-chairs. So in total, we have approximately 60 CEOs to lead this group, an advisory board with 25 CEOs from Italy, having functions of addressing the strategy and assisting the chairwoman. And we have also an international advocacy group with approximately 30 global CEOs, some of whom are really and truly famous, and the chairs of the business federations who are going to be our ambassadors. Priorities, our claim is very clear. And you might have seen the claim on our logo. We have kept a line. We have also made efforts after the crisis of this pandemic. Our 7 task forces, 6 are the commerce, investments, energy efficiency, integrity, labor, education, digital transformation, and infrastructures. We have added on a couple. One is life science, and the reasons are clear to everyone, and an action council formed by members of task forces and others on sustainability and global emergencies. We have a special initiative together with our task force on women's empowerment, and The management is by a secretariat. Our colleagues from the Entrepreneurs Association are supervising our policy papers. We have 12 large organizing entities representing the industry, together with our network partners. 7 consulting partners are our knowledge partners, and we have scientific partners and particularly some famous Italian universities. We started our work on January 21st and 22nd. In July, we will have a midterm, and the final summit will be October 7 to 8. Then we will be in constant touch with the other engagement groups and the chair. And the final target is formulating practical pieces of advice, measurable in particular on sustainable development and the 3 Ps, and especially in cooperation with G20 and with emerging countries, Indonesia, Brazil, and others, so that we can share our methods.
Grazie mille
Thank you
Marco e
very
grazie a tutti
much
per aver
indeed.
fatto
Well,
chiarezza su
thank you,
come
Marco, and
funzionano
thank
poi
you
i
for all
movimenti
of you
degli
for having
group. Molto
clarified the way
interessante. Prima di passare
engagement
al
groups
secondo
work.
giro di
It is
domande,
very
volevo ricordare
interesting.
che è
Before
possibile
having the
anche
second
da
round of
lontano e non dovete
questions,
fare delle
I
domande
would like to
utilizzando
point out
slide.
that we can take
Vediamo se riusciremo a
questions
stare nei
through
tempi e riusciremo
Slido,
negli ultimi minuti
and
finali
if
per rispondere a un
time
paio di
doesn't
domande.
fleet,
Quindi
we will
come
have a couple of
secondo
minutes
giro
to
di domande
answer
vi
a couple of
chiederei
questions.
appunto quali
So
sono
the
le
second
priorità sul
round of
digitale che sul
questions is,
tavolo
what about the
si sta
priorities
lavorando
on the
in questo
digital,
momento,
which we have
partendo
on the
appunto
table
sempre
and you're
da Silvia
working
per
on
darci una
right
visione un
now,
pochino
starting with
più globale.
Sylvia, so that we can have a global vision about
Grazie
that?
Martina.
Well, thank
Allora,
you
di
very
nuovo
much,
io vi farei un
Martina.
poco di
Once more,
storia.
I really would like to step back
Il dossier
and tell
digitale
you
è
more about
contrattato in
history.
chiamiamola Digital Economy
Our
Task
digital
Force.
file
È una
is
task force che
being
esiste dal
dealt with in the
2016,
Digital
fu
Economy
istituita
Task Force,
dalla
which was set
presidenza
up in
cinese
2016,
e
and it was the Chinese
quest'anno
presidency which set
il
it up.
lavoro si conclude
This
sempre con
year,
una ministeriale sull'economia
uh,
digitale e che
they
quest'anno
work with
avverrà
a
affiancata
ministerial
a una
meeting on
ministeriale
digital economy,
sull'università e la
together with a
digitalizzazione.
ministerial meeting
L'abbiamo
on
voluto chiamare
university and
Informal Academics
digitization,
Network.
which we called
Ehm,
Informal Academics
L'agenda
Network.
quest'anno è molto ricca
Now,
di
the agenda
argomenti
this
di cui
year
forse
is really
l'economia
thick in terms of
non
different
solo
topics, and
l'importanza della
this proves
digitalizzazione
not
nel
only
contesto
how
attuale per quello della
digitization is
crisi sanitaria,
important right
ma
now,
anche il ruolo della
but
digitalizzazione
indeed
in
the
un'era
role of
dell'informazione molto
digitization
profonda che sta
in
avvenendo
terms
tra
of
l'economia e la società.
the very profound changes
Quello che
between
vorrei dire prima
economics
di
and
elencare un
society
pochino
at
le nostre
large.
priorità
Now,
e il
before
lavoro
listing our
che stiamo preparando per
priorities
la
and the
ministeriale è
work
che
that we
questa è
are
una track
preparing
che
for the ministerial
è
meeting,
cresciuta
is
e
that this
maturata
is a
insieme
truck
al G20.
which grew and
La presidenza
matured
italiana
together with the
racchiude 5
G20.
anni di
The
lavoro molto
Italian
intenso.
presidency
Gli
has an
argomenti
heritage and a
spesso
legacy of
partiamo da una ballata
5 years of work,
su
and
svariati anni di
topics
lavoro
are
del
being
G20
dealt with from one year to the
e quindi
next.
sono
I joined
cresciuti
the
sono
G20 since
cresciuti gli
quite a few
argomenti che
years
abbiamo
now. We
approfondito,
have
i
more
paesi
topics to
che
deal
fanno
with.
parte del G20 hanno
They've
avuto
been
l'opportunità di imparare
studied
l'uno
more
dagli
in
altri
depth, and the
quello che
G20
funziona, quello che non
member
funziona,
states
quali sono i rischi
learned
da affrontare assieme.
mutually what
Quindi
works,
per
what doesn't
quest'anno
work,
abbiamo aperto
risks,
una
and how to
ministeriale che
work
si
together.
svolgerà a
So this
Trieste
year,
il
our
4 e 5
ministerial
agosto.
meeting will be
Il
held in
lavoro
Trieste on
italiano si
August 4th and
appoggia su
5th,
due assi
and
prioritari che
the
sono la
work by
digitalizzazione e quella
Italy is on two
del
pillars:
governo, delle pubbliche
digitization
amministrazioni e
of
l'economia
public
digitale.
administration and local
Allora, sul primo
governments,
punto,
and
quello sulla
digital economy. On the
digitalizzazione del
first
governo,
point,
dove
therefore, on
realtà l'Italia presenta
government
moltissime
digitization,
eccellenze,
where Italy
abbiamo
has
deciso di
many points
concentrarci
of excellence, we have
su
decided
tre priorità.
to focus
La prima
on
è quella
3 priorities. The
digitale.
first one is digital
Quest'anno sappiamo
identity.
anche che la Commissione
This
europea,
year, we know
la Presidente della
that
Commissione
the
europea ha
European
lanciato
Commission
l'identità
and the
digitale come
President of the European Commission launched digital identity as one of the big priorities, and we see that under many respects, digital identity is almost a human right. Think about the cases of many refugees around in the world losing their identity because when they leave their countries of origins, often they have no way of proving who they are. So digital identity is a personal asset. The second element has to do with agile regulations, and this is something that we have been discussing also in the past, but we have an innovation here. In 2018, the Japanese G20 presidency launched a rather new concept that is Society 5.0. In the past, we have talked about industrial transformation 4.0, and we said that digitization is the new industrial revolution. But G20 went well beyond that, and we started to think how society should be like in order to be coping with this digitization. And along this line, rules and regulations as far as governments have to be able to react and indeed have a political stance and approve acts which may be adjusted to this digital transformation. The last point on this pillar, on this governmental pillar, so to say, are digital instruments for public administrations. In 2018, we worked more than ever because the Argentinian presidency at that time adopted a number of digital governance principles as much as we did. Italy takes up this challenge and implements it practically, and that's why we work on specific digital instruments. I don't want to take too much time away from you because the agenda is even larger than this, and so very quickly now I can tell you that we are going to be working on digitization as an engine of sustainable industry, measuring digital economy, which I find very interesting within our discussion today, because there is a specific aspect on the women's role into digital, how we measure it and what we can do to fill up the gap on this respect. Now, connectivity will be an instrument for social inclusion so that everyone may get connected. And we are going to talk about themes such as smart cities, how public money can help creating intelligent and smart cities. We are working on shared principles for the protection of minors online as well as consumers' protection, where Italy took a very new approach based on blockchain technology in terms of guarantee traceability of products. That is, how much we can trust a product in terms of protecting final consumers. The last point I want to raise is that we have been discussing about an extremely controversial issues for many years now, which is basic, that is data flow. You cannot have digitization without data or artificial intelligence without data. But the issue of having a free circulation of data within the framework of a safe environment based on trust by and towards the users is probably still to be investigated upon. We still are discussing about it. We're still working on it. G20 has adopted the principle of data free flow with trust. We are investigating into it. We're trying to make it become something which is really workable for citizens in the G20 society, but also globally. Thank you,
Alberta, invece
Martina.
accennavi te
So thank you,
su
Silvia.
innovazione,
Alberta, you were saying
digitalizzazione e il
before
lavoro del
that
futuro
innovation,
premiare qualità. E
digitization,
quindi
and
cosa
jobs
significa
for the future
digitalizzazione nel
is a
contesto del
priority area. What does it mean to have digitization
Assolutamente,
there?
grazie mille Martina. Come citavi giustamente
Absolutely.
prima,
Thank you very much, Martina. As you rightly said, these are some of the fundamental priorities for our job, starting from the role technology and digitalization play in the field of education, in the world of labor, and technology technology, as a tool to mitigate climate change. Digitalization as an important tool to promote inclusion. The importance of a new modern institution and of digital learning has also been highlighted by a survey we carried out last year. More than 10,000 people participated too. After the climate change, the importance of modernizing and of investing in educational system was classified amongst the three major priorities young people think should be tackled by our leaders. For this reason, one of the most important points for us is this relationship between digitalization and education. And the recent pandemic has obviously highlighted this even more. It has highlighted the need to review the educational system, not in terms of what is being offered, but also of the way in which it's being offered. And from this point of view, technology offers unique tools to provide a more inclusive and adequate education to meet the world of labor, which is more and more digital. To allow this to happen, the starting point, both in developing countries and in developed countries, should be guaranteeing adequate digital infrastructure and also make digital devices available to everybody. In fact, the lack of infrastructure and the lack of devices is a huge problem for many schools, universities, peoples and families. Still today, very many children in the world, in poor countries, don't have access to the internet or don't have TV, personal computers and or radios. And this obviously amplifies the digital divide. According to UNICEF, 31% of students around the world cannot be reached by remote teaching. Obviously, we can imagine that with what happened with the COVID crisis, this has created a huge problem in very many parts of the world, and this obviously has widened the disparity in our society. The second important point is that of dealing with digital education and skills mismatch. And from this point of view, we ask schools and universities to play an essential role in training young people, and not just young people, with adequate knowledge for the digital world, which is changing. This clearly emerged during the crisis, during the COVID crisis, during which people without basic digital skills had more difficulties in having access to basic services to be able to continue to work. Moreover, as it is becoming clearer and clearer, education is not just something that concerns young people, but also other generations of our society. And within this framework, we think that vocational programs and training programs be focused on digital, because these are essential to guarantee that these people are not excluded from the labor market. And also the case of entrepreneurs and SMEs. There too, digitalization is important so that everybody can embrace innovation and promote economic recovery. Another very important point, and we're glad the Italian G20 presidency is working on this, as it has already been mentioned by Silvia before, is the impact, not just the positive but also negative impact technology can have on everybody's lives. So we ask to take into account the improper use of technology and the threats a connected world brings about, thinking in particular about the impact on mental health of young people in particular, and thinking about possible negative effects this might have on vulnerable people and children who do not have the experience and necessary skills to protect themselves from these threats. As for the fourth point, we also want to bet on continuous support to promote and create innovative startups, especially for young entrepreneurs, both in developed and in developing countries. In fact, young people are involved in innovative projects because they use new technologies in various industries, finance, communication, and also in industries connected to climate change and sustainability. Despite this, for very many young people, bureaucracy and financing are obstacles to create scalable solutions. And so it is of fundamental importance for us to strengthen cooperation between the public and the private sectors, to implement funding systems to reduce risks, support loans to to innovative startups, especially for young entrepreneurs. And one very, very last point has to do with the importance of accelerating the digital transition of public services, especially health, education and safety. Pandemics reminded us of the importance of the digital transition as a tool to reduce inequalities, especially in the health sector, where technology can be used to guarantee access, equality to basic services, personalized services and research. And here clearly the role of research together with that of technology is of fundamental importance, we believe, a tool to fight those challenges we have to tackle today and in the future. Thank you very much, Martina. Thank you, Alberta. Okay, women are represented at all levels of the tech industry. We know this, but the problem starts from far. There are fewer women getting a degree in scientific topics, and we see this also at top level. So I'll ask Martina Gatto to tell us, besides these themes that we know are of fundamental importance, what does it mean? What does digitalization mean? What are the priorities you have identified in your engagement group?
Well, thank you, Martina. As I was saying before, the digital is one of the fundamental pillars right from the beginning of Women 20, and we continue to confirm that for the Italian presidency in 2021. Lots of opportunities we have with the digital, but also many challenges, and civil society should actually make recommendations to the top. With Women 20's German presidency, we shared that between 60 to 70% of jobs would be digitized, but there were not enough young women and women to take the new opportunity, to make the most of the new opportunities on the market. And our studies tell us that there are not enough young women and women on this, because in second grade you have the stereotype that women are not particularly versed into STEM and digital matters and subjects. Therefore, science, technology, mathematics, etc. And industry needs professionals and people who are versed into these topics. And often they tell us that it's very difficult to find women who are good enough at this. First of all, it is important to bear in mind that digital is a great opportunity in terms of job seeking and jobs in general. Women are not enough into the digital world, particularly for cultural and reasons as well as stereotypes, which we have to cope with. We work a lot, both in the private and public sectors, and this has happened over the past few years in terms of training more young women on STEM subjects. But then you have to bear in mind that you have millennials, for instance, who now need to be supported and be trained and have access to new job opportunities. So it's fundamental to work on children and young women in terms of STEM subjects, but also on culture, because we have to think about all these millennial women who may be requalified or newly trained through the new empowerment programs on the digital. Important to work on children, but we should not forget the present people who are working today and may support Italy in the path towards digitization. Let us not forget that this pandemic has caused the loss of 99,000 jobs, which were indeed held by women. The digital was a big opportunity for all of us because during the pandemic, the digital has allowed us to have a private life also during a lockdown period and support our work thanks to the use of many digital tools. The situation of digitization from the point of view of the opportunity of owning a device as well as potentiating infrastructure infrastructure is certainly not equal all over Italy. I am connected from the south of Italy with an infrastructure which is not really very strong and not very quick as well, and this is a problem in terms of having access to digital by everyone. So there are two issues. One is the right to get disconnected, and women were particularly hit by this pandemic, not only in terms of health, and this is undeniable, but also in terms of reconciling your family life with your job in the context of Italian society where most caregivers are women and women have to match their private life, schools that are closed, and their jobs. Working from a cultural standpoint is important because we want to have a fair distribution of tasks in terms of giving care to kids and seniors, but it is fundamental also to guarantee the right to disconnection. Another digital challenge is connected with cyber hate and cyber violence. This is a phenomenon that involves all of us, but in particular has to do with women. Most of the tech society companies, those providing social media and other apps helping communication, often have approaches when it comes to violence on women without a preventative policy. They just react when digital violence had already been expressed or the sharing of intimate material has already taken place. Therefore, to fight against violence in a digital space, both governments and companies must commit to develop a preventative approach. It has to do with cultural backgrounds, of course, but also calls for a strengthening of artificial intelligence and digital tools to avoid attacks. And anyhow, we have to take into consideration that a hate attack or a digital violence are usually being brought to light after they happened. And so it's important to prevent all this to
Rapidissima
happen.
perché il tempo
Thank you very
veramente
much,
sta finendo,
Martina. I
quindi
shall be very
probabilmente
concise because time's
Marco
up
Felisati
almost. And so I
vedrete
wanted to
sappiamo
ask
che
Mr.
la
Marco
ripresa economica
Felisati,
passa
when we
necessariamente per
know that
l'evoluzione
economic
digitale, quindi il ruolo
recovery
del
goes
business
through
delle aziende è
digital
cruciale.
revolution, and
Come
therefore
si
the
sta
role of
affrontando la
business as
situazione
companies is
nel
crucial
G20?
and
Siamo in
dramatic.
5
How you
minuti,
cope
abbiamo anche
with
il tempo per il
this
programma
within
per le
the framework
domande.
of G20. I'll give you 5 minutes.
Lo so che si fa.
Sure, Martina, sure. Sure, I'll try. I want to start from something which is very important, in my opinion, something Silvia said. G20 is a learning process. It's a continuous learning process. But it works on the basis of consensus, also in the engagement group and in the B20 in particular. This makes it difficult, really difficult, to put forward really innovative proposals. But this is what is imposed by the current situation. We are with our back to the wall, and so we must make a leap forward. We're talking about digital technologies, of course, and we're talking about digital transformation. Why am I saying so, therefore? I'm saying so because digital technology horizontally crosses all economic and social activities. Obviously, those of businesses, but also those of citizens. So there is a task force, a specific task force dedicated to digital transformation in the G20. But we talk about it when we talk about commerce, about energy, about everything, really. Because if we have a global challenge, the answer must be global as well. And regulation is crucial here. And unfortunately, on regulation, especially multilateral regulation, there is still a lot to be done. We're all very well aware of this. the G20 task force know this perfectly. The WTO, for example, must still share a common view of electronic commerce. So there is still a lot to be done. Given that I need to be brief, the priorities the task force is focusing on totally coincide with those listed by the colleagues. Make the approach to digital technology stronger in all possible programs. This is clear. And connected to this, obviously, training is going to be very important. We need to train both in the public and private sectors today and tomorrow. And we've got to reconsider the working environment on the basis of digital technologies, especially for women. I totally agree with what you said. We've got to look forward. And another priority is that of identifying risks, and a lot has been said about this already. And then we also need to favor inclusion, of course, and the reduction of disparities through digital connectivity. So we need regulations and correct policies for everybody, reducing risks and allowing digitalization to reach everybody. The inclusive dimension in particular, I'm accelerating because I want to keep you the wind. The times can happen through broadband, ultra broadband, but also through satellites or mobile systems. So these last 60 seconds, I want to dedicate them to a wider idea. The benefits for economic growth are clear. But there's two pieces of data which I think is worth mentioning. The World Economic Forum tells us that by 2022, 60% of global GDP will depend on technologies. So I think we should try and understand what depend upon actually means, which ranges of society will be involved, how much of this dependency will for instance, be connected to the idea of having access to connections in urban areas or not, or for education and or work. And then the second thing is where will geographically and economically be this development? In less developed countries, the situation will be different, of course, because if we want to reduce inequalities amongst regions, amongst countries, and amongst businesses, we have to work really hard. I close by mentioning some themes that are being discussed in other task force. The speed of innovation doesn't really allow regulators to keep the pace. But it is a fact that the lack of digital standards is blocking development, and it creates unbalances amongst different countries and businesses, threatening, the full-fledged development of digital transformation. Interoperability of technologies and of different platforms is very important. So we need to have shared open standards at that level too. And if we look at, for instance, cross-boundary procedures, say you want to export something or import something, well, 7% of the total value of global exchanges is absorbed by paperwork. So think about the digital revolution. I mean, it would be a huge revolution also for these exchanges in an interconnected world, because this situation is unsustainable. So we need to improve the efficacy of control through digital technologies, and at the same time reduce the impact of phenomena such as frauds, etc. So I close here, repeating once again that we need a positive cross-fertilization. I mean, this has already started with the government on this topic, but we have to focus also on trade and climate change, because these are going to be the most important topics to be discussed during the G20. This fil rouge that goes through these three topics is, the decisive match we're going to play in the near future. Thank you. Thank you very much, Marco. We are right on time, so I'd like to thank you all. It's always difficult in these virtual environments. It's always a challenge, but I still have a few questions coming in. The first has to do with gender equality, and maybe Martina can briefly say something about this, on the fact that basically the digital transformation allows us to better tackle the gender equality issue. And how is this being done? Very quickly, can you tell us something? Sorry, I didn't get the connection. I hope I could hear you probably, and I hope you can hear me talking about digital divide. Yes, the digital transformation is an opportunity for gender equity if it is accompanied, of course, by equity for women, and if it is accompanied by training and culture to allow women to have access to new jobs. Perfect. Thank you very much. Another question for Alberta Bellino. We wonder whether the voice of young people is really listened to within Youth 20. I mean, how can you channel the voice of young people and make it heard? Thank you very much for this question. Now, obviously, we're trying to collect ideas from the highest possible number of young people. We had the first consultation before the G20 Italian presidency, and we've collected the voice of 10,000 Italian young people, asking them what were the priorities we would have to discuss with the G20. And as I said before, the climate was the first priority, followed by the other topics which have become the B20 topics. What we'll do from here to the summit will be a new set of consultations through questionnaires and also through meetings with other youth associations and young people at national and international level to try and actually collect the highest possible number of voices and ideas from young people. Then clearly, will our voices be heard and listened to? Well, we are grateful to the Italian presidency, in fact, because they are involving us in very many working groups of the G20. And so this is a sign of opening. It's a sign they want to listen to our proposals. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you all very much for this very interesting debate, which also triggered lots of questions. Unfortunately, we can't have time to answer now, but we will at a later stage. Let's hope we'll be able to follow the work of all the different groups so that we can get to the end of October with the closing of the G20 Italian presidency with a high level of awareness of what is happening. And let's also hope we can meet in person, possibly here in Cortina next year. So thank you very much once again, and talk to you soon.